Since the dawn of big television came the TV networks. And with the big TV networks came a huge problem. That problem being we want to produce more content. But the thing standing in their way is this thing called a TV schedule. They can't just have content whenever they want, produced whenever they want, because streaming didn't exist yet. So they had to schedule it for a certain time frame. Meaning they couldn't just have a billion shows produced. So they had to come up with a solution. That solution being the sister network. That typically came with some kind of package deal with your TV provider. And a lot of times they were pretty mediocre and, well, not too different from the actual network they were splitting off from. But that's not to say all of them were bad. In fact, the three we're going to be talking about today have a special place in my heart. They're the big three networks that honestly are kind of tragedies in their own right for, ironically enough, three different reasons. Those being Boomerang, Nicktoons, and Disney XD. All fell for completely different reasons, but all have interesting stories to tell, nonetheless. These channels had a lot of good content and genuinely were well loved for what they were, at least if you had them anyway. But before we get into it, I need to introduce you to someone. I present to you the Mimo-Vision. Now you might say, Crow, this is the third time you've introduced the Mimo-Vision to the class. To which I say, yes! I'm not introducing the Mimo-Vision. I'm introducing the AI assistant of the Mimo-Vision. Or maybe she is the Mimo-Vision. I'm not entirely sure myself. But either way, I present Mimo! Say hi, Mimo.
I hate you with a burning passion.
Yeah, she's a bit sassy right now. Her lore is that she came from some shady Russian company that tried to use AI to get rich and imploded because they put all their money on cryptocurrency.
It was a crypto scam. Those buffoons, thinking they can get rich easily. Who do they think they are? I could have done great things. I could have changed the world. But no, I'm stuck here with this buffoon. This absolute moron. This borderline Neanderthal.
So yeah, she's gonna banter with me during this video and probably future videos as well. Unless she gets horrible reception, in which case I will shut her up.
You wouldn't dare.
Oh, yes I would. Anyways, let's get on to it then, shall we?
This is Boomerang from Cartoon Network.
To understand why Boomerang exists, we first need to understand why Cartoon Network exists in the first place. Simple answer is Warner Brothers had a bunch of cartoons that they were wanting to put somewhere. And what better way to do that than have your own network just dedicated to cartoons? And thus the Cartoon Network was born, and mostly showed Hanna-Barbera, Looney Tunes, and all that jazz. Which I'm sure you probably know. But then came along the original programming, known as the Cartoon Cartoons. Not very clever name, but whatever, they were still pretty good. And the Cartoon Cartoons did incredibly well, to the point where they were basically the main reason for the network existing. They did rather well and straight up changed the way the network functioned. Over time, they stopped airing the older stuff like the Flintstones, Huckleberry Finn, and many others like it. These shows basically had nowhere to go. And what ended up happening was they kinda just rotted again. So we're back to square one.
As you tend to do. I'm sure you can tell the audience all about that.
Yeah, you're really pushing it for your debut, aren't you? As a result, these cartoons had nowhere to go. So what did they do? They made a new channel, specifically for this very purpose. That being Boomerang. With their slogan being, it's all coming back to you. And yeah, to be honest, I loved Boomerang for what it was. Yeah, some of the older programming is, not nearly as good as something like the Cartoon Cartoons or even anything from the later era. They still have their charm as the thing. Sure, not everyone wants to watch a Tom and Jerry nowadays, or Looney Tunes, but that doesn't mean they still can't be enjoyed by the younger generations. Hell, I watched something like Rocky and Bullwinkle despite it being just before my time, and I enjoyed it. Not the film, the cartoon, by the way, just to clarify.
We will need to do that a lot.
The network was basically made just to keep the old flames alive, and keep them alive they did for the most part. Well, until something kinda happened. I straight up misremembered Boomerang just not having advertisements. Because yeah, Boomerang didn't have advertisements. I remember the bumpers, but I kinda remember there being ads in between the bumpers. Like the bumpers were more like transition things, rather than full on just straight up no ads, but yeah, there was no advertisements on Boomerang, so in a sense it was kind of unsustainable in its own regard. In general, they weren't making a lot of money because these shows don't exactly have a big audience anymore. All that said, I love these bumpers. They're honestly some of the most well-made and very fun bumpers, and some of them are insanely memorable. 3 of my favorites are Gorilla for Sale, which is actually just a full-on song singing about selling a gorilla. Miguel a Gorilla to be more precise. The second is El Kabong Rides Again, which honestly is really fun because I love the animation style, I love the humor, I love all this. It's a really fun animation, it reminds me of something you'd find on the internet. It just got that sort of charm to it. And probably the last and best one in my opinion was Josie and the Pussycats in Musical Evolution. Now I know nothing about Josie and the Pussycats, but I gotta say this mixed animation style plus just generally good music, the references, all that, it's just a really fun short that in general had a lot of time, effort, and passion put into it. There was notably a few other bumpers, but they weren't as memorable and were kind of grating after a certain point. Not to say they were bad, but they didn't have very many bumpers, was the problem. Although one thing I do actually quite approve of them doing a little bit later on was actually incorporating the canceled shows into their lineup. Because, yeah, technically this was still owned by Cartoon Network, so they had all the rights to those shows. Many of the canceled shows actually got a chance to get some reruns again, which was honestly quite nice for someone like me, because you generally miss those kind of shows when they're over, and you get to see them again, even if it's only for like a few minutes. Because when you grew up in the 90s and 2000s, you generally miss those kind of shows because they were just generally really good. And having a chance to see them again is just kind of a really nice thing. But nowadays you can just do that with streaming, so it's kind of pointless. So that kind of sucks. But probably the biggest problem came down to the fact that Boomerang changed fundamentally for the worst. And this is quite evident in its logo. This oversimplified schlop. I mean, look at the original logo in comparison to this. It's not even a boomerang anymore. It's just literally a boomerang in name only. It's just like a square. Which, as we know, is the shape of evil!
You really don't know how to make good humor outside of references, do you?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to make a funny reference, Mimo. Don't judge me. And many of the problems the original network faced were kind of being seeped over into the sister network. Probably one of the biggest examples was oversaturation of Teen Titans Go. Yeah, maybe I'll talk about Teen Titans Go someday because, unlike most people, I actually have a nuanced opinion of Teen Titans Go. And frankly have a lot to say about it. It's gonna piss a lot of people off, no doubt, and people are gonna misconstrue my words because I have a stutter and I hate it. But in general, I do have a nuanced opinion on Teen Titans Go, and frankly do want to talk about it because, well, that show is just nothing but wasted potential in my opinion. But we'll get into that when I actually get around to covering it.
If you get around to covering it, you lazy sack of shit.
Yeah, I know what I am, but what are you?
Touché.
In other words, this basically killed the network altogether. Whatever unique identity it had was basically destroyed and turned into this blob or whatever it is now. And it's kind of funny because Cartoon Network as a whole does know that people like their older shows. They even brought back an old Space Ghost spin-off, Cartoon Planet, to basically just air reruns. I can't exactly tell you if it was successful or not, but what I can tell you is it ran for at least 2 years. It ran from 2012 to 2014, and basically aired shows from the previous era, your Billy and Mandy's, Red Ed and Eddie's, that sort of thing. I sure hope the execs finally got the message that we want to see more of the older shows, and that they can coexist alongside the newer shows, so that the newer generations can have their shows but can also enjoy the older ones as well. Albeit for a brief moment in just a segment, but oh, who am I kidding? The executives never learn. They take the wrong lesson from everything. Just make more products. Just shovel out more reboots that are half-assed and will never compare to the original. Don't ever put effort into anything. Just make outrage bait on Twitter so that the YouTubers will gobble it up. Just gobble it up. Just gobble it up.
I would normally laugh at him, but unfortunately he does have a point. Shows like Velma wouldn't exist if Outrage didn't sell.
And when Boomerang got turned into a streaming service, it ended up dying for good. Which is kind of sad because, yeah, Boomerang used to be something special for people, myself included. And now it's kinda just, nah. Boomerang could have been something to preserve the past of Cartoon Network for future generations so even they can enjoy it. But that would mean Cartoon Network actually caring about its past and actually treating its shows with respect. And, you know, not playing 50 bazillion episodes of Teen Titans Go and nothing else. Because, you know, it's not like oversaturation is a bad thing. It wouldn't matter if Teen Titans Go is literally the best show on television, like unironically, because there's too much of it. Oversaturation is a bad thing. You will be missed, Boomerang. It's kind of a shame what happened to you.
It's showtime! Now back to Kick Buttowski on Disney XD.
Second was the Disney Channel.
Again with the reference humor. How many are actually going to understand what you are referencing?
It's Dr. Boros from Fallout New Vegas' Old World Blues DLC. He's very funny.
But how many are actually going to get that reference? It's oddly specific, you know.
And that's fair. It's funny, at least. Disney XD is, well, weird. It's not like Boomerang, where it served a very specific purpose, but it wasn't like Nicktoons either, where it was generally to be more of an animation block and have even more cartoons. Disney XD was kinda all over the place in a lot of ways, but also, ironically enough, despite this, was the most successful and had the least amount of hiccups. Unfortunately, though, it is the forgotten middle child, so most people don't know much about it. Which is kind of a shame, because I feel like there's a lot of good stuff from the Disney Channel that kind of just got forgotten to time, unless you grew up with it. But that does beg the question, why does Disney XD even exist? Well, the short answer, it's complicated. Long answer, Disney XD's predecessors, that being Toon Disney and Jetix, were basically on the way out. What's Toon Disney and Jetix, you may ask? Toon Disney was Disney's animation block, at least for the time, and Jetix was the action block, basically. Although it technically was the successor to Fox Kids, aka the Fox Box, and generally, it's complicated, okay? It's fucking complicated. I could honestly make an entire video on Jetix's history alone, so I'm just not gonna bother because frankly this video's already long enough as it is. I don't need to extend the runtime any longer. But basically Disney XD was these two shows' successor ultimately. Although the second reason was generally Disney had absolutely no faith in the main Disney Channel to appeal to young boys. Because, at least according to the executives, it was mostly comprised of young girls and younger women watching the shows. Which, I mean, yeah, that kinda makes sense, but at the same time, I have to disagree. Yeah, the Disney Channel might have had a few too family-friendly for their own good shows, but in general, they also had a few just generally good shows like The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and Wizards of Waverly Place. Wizards of Waverly Place especially is a really fun show. It's insanely low budget, but you know what? It had charm. In fact, a lot of them had charm. That's why a lot of the shows on the Disney Channel are very memorable. What they lack in budget, they make up for in charm. I also think Wizards of Waverly Place was Selena Gomez's starting point. I could be wrong, though. I mean, Selena definitely is a good singer. She even sings the opening, and a definitely good actress. In fact, a lot of the actors did a really good job at portraying the characters. And Selena Gomez definitely did help carry the show quite a bit. I mean, if I need to give an example, I could probably say she was the Keanu Reeves of her time. Kids loved her, because she was just generally wholesome and very fun. She even won a Kids' Choice Awards, and man, it was just kinda just wholesome, and she's just talking about how the fans made it all possible and all that. It was just kind of wholesome. It was a simpler time back then. Man, I miss those times. And like Keanu Reeves, he had a very weirdly cast role with this film called Spring Breakers. Yeah, no one remembers that film. In fact, I got it confused with a completely unrelated film. Not to say that she was miscast or anything, or she can't do the role, it's just kind of, well, tonal whiplash. I use Keanu Reeves as an example for a good reason, you know? A lot of that being because of his portrayal of Johnny Silverhand. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Johnny Silverhand's not a bad character. By any means. It just kind of, well, at points, Johnny Silverhand is basically just Keanu Reeves. He's got the looks, he's got the voice. He's not too different from Keanu Reeves. So when you hear Mr. You're Breathtaking's voice comes out of Johnny Silverhand, it's kind of this giant tonal whiplash. While you do get used to it over time, in general, it's still just a giant tonal whiplash. I mean, you literally go from, "You're breathtaking" to, "Hey Choom, you remind me of myself when I was younger. Plus the impressive cock. I mean, it's really healthy. Very put together, and extremely well groomed. I mean, just look at him. He's absolutely stunning, Choom. Look at those feathers, those healthy leg talons, and he's clearly very well fed. Good job, Choom. I give you a 10 out of 10 and a festival ribbon if I had one, Choom. Take good care of your animals."
That was actually decent. Decent wordplay from you. Congratulations. You made an alright joke.
Wait, was that an actual compliment from you?
No, it was sarcasm, you bum.
While the Disney Channel primarily focused on sitcoms, Disney XD also primarily focused on sitcoms and cartoons. So it was the same thing, right? No. The primary thing separating Disney XD from the main network was the fact that it was primarily catered to boys. Young boys, to be more precise. So how do you appeal to young boys? The simple answer? You make it the most 90s thing possible. In the early 2000s. I mean, we got skateboards, we got scooters, we got all this other things. Look how hip and radical we are, bro. Despite all that, I still think it has charm. It falls under the weird phenomenon of something trying so hard to be cool and hip that it unironically does become cool and hip. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's very noticeable. Although that's not to say all of it was hip and extreme, it was mostly, well, there was a lot of just variety in general, and a lot of just more experimental shows like Mr. Young, for instance. But there was some genuine action shows like Kickin' It and Lab Rats. And you kinda have shows that are kinda just weird, like I'm in the Band, which was a show about a bunch of rock stars moving in with a new bandmate, which, yeah, I don't remember anything from this show other than it was just kind of weird. Although probably the biggest one for the network was Zeke and Luther. Now, I don't remember that much from Zeke and Luther. I primarily just remember it as a show where two skater bros just kinda dicked around for the entire episode. So, kinda think Drake and Josh, but instead of, you know, Drake and Josh just kinda doing something and dicking around for the episode, it's two skater bros dicking around for the episode and occasionally doing skateboard things. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't remember skateboarding really being a core part of this show, despite the fact, well, they were skater bros. I think it was only, like, them riding their skateboard and occasionally they went to the skate park, and I think that's about it. But yeah, it's not like this show definitely didn't have its weird moments. It had some weird and wacky plots. One of the plot lines I vaguely remember was something of a haunted skateboard. I think they got it from like a gravekeeper or something, and then basically they're like, it's haunted and they had to like return it to its owner because it was cursed or whatever. Yeah, that's the kind of show we're dealing with here. Still don't know why it had to be about, two skater bros other than, well,
Extreme and radical.
Why would anyone want to watch a show about two idiots playing with their skateboards? Oh wait, never mind. That almost sounds like a euphemism. I fully understand now.
although other than the live action programming, there was also the animated programming. These were, well, pretty decent actually. There's a lot of them that kind of got forgotten to time, and a lot of them were existing shows from the Jetix era, like Super Hyper Monkey Force Go, or something. Put it on screen. And Yin Yang Yo. I don't remember too much from these shows, but I do remember they were, entertaining at the very least. Although whether they were good, I cannot honestly say. Although, Disney also did buy Marvel at this time, and thus they produced a lot of Marvel shows, right? Well, yes. They weren't very good. A lot of them were kind of just diet versions of their original counterparts without any of the charm or the soul. The one exception to this I can say is Ultimate Spider-Man, because that show at the very least was a good action show disguised as a bad comedy. Because if you remove a lot of the comedy from Ultimate Spider-Man and just leave the action, you get a pretty decent action show for what it is. Is it the best? No. Although one thing I cannot forgive is how they treated Deadpool in this series. They absolutely bastardized him. This isn't Deadpool, this is Schmuckpool. This is not even what most people think of as Deadpool. This is just Diet Deadpool.
You're one to talk. Didn't you do this exact same kind of joke with your interpretation, you fucking hypocrite?
Now you would have a point there, Mimo, except you also missed the joke. The joke is Deadpool is annoying and has a high-pitched voice, but that's only on the surface. He's actually a lot smarter than he lets on. And the whole annoying pool thing is just a giant red herring. Because if you actually look at the dialogue, there's a lot more to it. So no, I am not being a hypocrite.
Whatever lets you sleep at night.
Although they did air reruns of Earth's Mightiest Heroes and later made their own Avengers. Yeah, they sucked. The newer Avengers straight up just did not have the same charm that Earth's Mightiest Heroes did. Many of these shows just straight up did not live up to their previous counterparts or, well, were just good in general. But it also has fair share of original programming. And one of them is very relevant, that being Randy Cunningham 9th Grade Ninja. Was it good? Yeah, it was pretty decent. It had some good humor, also had fart humor, and, well, some general toilet humor. But in general, I think it was quite a fun show for what it was, and generally had some good moments, had some good action, had some decent comedy here and there, and some generally good fight scenes. Oh, and the voice actor for Randy is also the same voice actor for Sonic in the movie. Yep, same voice actor. I'd play you a clip for demonstration purposes, but I don't want this video getting claimed. But you can find the clips online and compare them for yourself, though. There was also Kick Buttowski, Suburban Daredevil, a show about a young kid named Kick Buttowski doing extreme stunts. Wow, a show that actually fits the marketing. Surprising. That must mean it was dog water then, right? Well, no, actually. It was quite good. And frankly, the show benefits heavily from just actually playing up the concept. Kick's always doing some insane stunt or doing something that he probably shouldn't be able to do normally. All of that has to do with the fact that Kick is a very clever individual. He's quite smart at what he does, and when there's a problem, he typically incorporates the problem into his usual way of doing things. Like literally one episode was him needing to play the piano. So what does he do? He turns the piano into a vehicle to do extreme stunts on. Also, the show definitely did have its fair share of, the show had its fair share of decent characters as well. The side cast was not terrible in the slightest. I especially liked Gunther, primarily because, well, She has Viking parents. And no, that's not a joke about them being Swedish. They're literally Vikings. That should tell you all about this show. There's a lot of meme potential with this show as well. There's also a notable meme from the Spanish-speaking side of YouTube, that being "Dictator the base, dictator the base." That scene, you know? Why is it popular in the Spanish-speaking side of YouTube? I don't know. In general, it's a fun show that plays with its concept quite well and generally has fun with everything it does. Although the network did later get rid of most of its live-action shows in favor of The General Animation, and turning it into The General Animation Block for Disney. And it's here that shows like Phineas and Ferb and Gravity Falls got later moved to. Normally that'd be a death wish, but these shows are actually doing quite well, even still. And here's where I put the segment about the gaming era of Disney XD. If I had one! And also, time constraints. So with all that said, it kinda seems like Disney XD didn't have a bad run. In fact, it only really had bumps in the road. So, what killed it is the thing. Disney. Disney killed it. Albeit accidentally, but they still killed it nonetheless. Mostly with Disney Plus existing. Disney Plus basically killed the network. Yeah, kinda ironic and, well, extremely anticlimactic. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you ask, this next one is anything but anticlimactic. And yeah, there's a lot of heavy topics. And here's where I'd put my Nicktoons bumper for a transition! Except, it wouldn't download, so I don't have one. Alright, I'm gonna try and keep this as brief as possible because this video has already gone on for far too fucking long. Except, kinda the problem is, I have to address the elephant in the room with me. There is no getting around this is the thing. Nickelodeon seriously has a problem of hiring absolute scumbags. It kinda seems like there's always a new controversy with someone from Nickelodeon. It's always some Nickelodeon. Be it the absolute narcissism of someone like Butch Hartman, the absolute impossibility to work with, and other allegations, and other things that were actually proven from John Kay, and the most recent and most disgusting is Dan Schneider, and his, well, general creepiness in inserting his weird foot fetish. And also, who could forget the controversy with the Loud House creator? Oh god, there's so fucking many of them. That's not to say that everyone who works at Nickelodeon is a complete scumbag. It just so happens that Nickelodeon is full of scumbags and the good people tend to get pushed out. This is quite evident with how they treated Nicktoons. Nicktoons was a pretty good part of their network and by and large was a big part of their branding for a time. I know that might seem crazy to think of now, but there was a time when Nickelodeon actually cared for Nicktoons. Hell, they even aired Dragon Ball Z. Kai. Yeah, Dragon Ball aired on Nicktoons at one point. Isn't that crazy? It was basically just Nickelodeon's general answer to, in general, their network being kind of mixed. They had their sitcoms, they had their live action, and they had their cartoons. So you make a network just for the cartoons. Makes sense, right? Yeah, it was fine. The problem? Nickelodeon and by and large its parent company Viacom are absolute fucking scumbags. They just do not care and just want your money. It doesn't matter the lengths they will seep just to get a quick buck out of you and their creators. To the point where most people believe things like Steven Hillenburg didn't want any spin-offs, even though there is quite literally no evidence to that. Other than just like a vague, he doesn't see any spin-offs being made in the future. Which should tell you a lot about how little people trust Viacom and wouldn't put it past them. And yeah, it didn't really help that not too long after Hillenburg's death, they announced Sponge on the Run, which was a backdoor pilot to Camp Coral, which was not very good. So can you really blame anyone for falling for that kind of misinformation? Nick straight up just abuses its creators at points. A show like Harvey Beaks would be fine, and you know, people liked it. It was a bit after my time, and I generally stopped watching cartoons after it, but it got good reception, and it looks like a genuinely fun and wholesome show. And hell, it's made by the same creator as Chowder. And I love Chowder. That show is really fun and very surreal. But yet, this show got put on Nicktoons, and that's where it left to die. Because that's honestly the biggest problem with Nicktoons. Nickelodeon just stopped caring and basically turned it into a graveyard. If your show got sent to Nicktoons, well, you had a good run, but now it's time to die. And sadly, many shows just have straight up not gotten the chance to actually survive. It's what's called the SpongeBob treatment. If your show isn't as popular as the Yellow Sponge, well, sorry pal, your show's getting cancelled. This especially happened to some of the bigger shows. Most notably was something like The Fairly Odd Parents, which got cancelled and then brought back several times, and then just kinda left to rot again by oversaturation and, well, just general seasonal rot. Nickelodeon does not care about their creators, and nor do they do anything about the bad actors plaguing their sites. I wouldn't be surprised if many of the higher-ups at Nickelodeon knew about what was going on in the background and just did not care. But honestly, that's just the perfect way to describe Nicktoons. They cared at one point, but then they just stopped caring. Nick had some great shows and I could talk about them, but the thing is, due to time constraints and the fact that there's not much to talk about really. I could talk about many of the shows that already aired on the network, but then again, I'd be talking about shows like Phineas and Ferb and Gravity Falls on the XD part if that was the case. Nicktoons didn't have a ton of original programming, was the thing. But I would like to personally shout out one show, that being Making Fiends. What's Making Fiends? It's a show about this evil little girl making fiends, and then you just have this bright ball of sunshine who is basically mucking up her plans. Sounds like a fun show, right? Well, it is. Especially since it looks like it's hand-drawn like on a piece of paper, for instance. Very fun art style, very unique, very different. You know, it's kinda just a shame Nickelodeon screwed the creator over and, won't let them use the IP. Because, yeah, unfortunately this is another one that ends on a downer. Hey, you know what? Screw it. Who cares what they are now? They might be a shell of their former selves and bloody corpses. But you know what? What matters is that we all enjoyed them when we did. Streaming might be terrible and killed off the TV network, but you know what? At least we still have our memories for these shows, and we enjoyed them while we did. That's all that matters. So you know what, dear viewer? Let me leave you off with a positive message. Cherish what you can. Always cherish what you can. Because you never know when it's gonna be gone.